folks. We are back for another installment of our everyday people, everyday stories, everyday lives during a global pandemic mini series. This is Brittany here, your host, and I am super excited to be joined with Dr. Calvin Smith, hailing from Harry here for the HBCU Connect and Love. More than anything, Calvin is a doctor in person, living and experiencing this global pandemic like all of us. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about what that has been like. Calvin, Dr. Smith, I'm
Calvin.
excited to excited to have you and talk, discuss whatever else kind of magic we'll make in the time that we have
Okay.
here together. I've been kicking off just kind of asking our co-host guests to share a little bit more about who they are. And
Okay.
so I'll ask you, who are you and what sort of aspects of those identity have really, of your identity rather, have really influenced how you're experiencing this moment in time?
Sure. So my name is Dr. Calvin Miles Smith III. I'm originally from Atlanta, Georgia. Today is my 41st birthday. Um, yeah,
Keep hand clap, snap,
yeah.
something.
Um,
Appreciate it.
I'm originally from Atlanta, Georgia. I grew up in Atlanta. My dad would say Atlanta born and Atlanta bred. He would finish it off by when I die, I'll be Atlanta dead. I'm not gonna say that. I'll probably be Nashville dead. But I went to Morehouse College from '97 to 2001, and came to Meharry Medical College. I finished Meharry Medical College and joined the internal medicine program here, and became chief resident. Stayed on as teaching faculty. Took over as the clerkship director, and then most recently I was appointed as the assistant dean of admissions. So I'm working with the young bright doctors, bringing them in and seeing what they're all about, trying to recruit the best and the brightest from all, especially from our HBCUs, but from everywhere.
Well,
Um, and now my most recent task is to work as a clinical site lead for one of our three testing sites for COVID-19 here in Nashville, on behalf of Meharry and the city of Nashville. So that has been the direct impact for me. I haven't stopped working. I'm thankful. I'm blessed that I have a job. But
mhm.
I've been basically testing, doing nasopharyngeal swabs on people and running the ship, teaching other people how to perform the nasopharyngeal swabs and making sure the paperwork is correct and all that jazz. And we today we probably saw around 325 people, so we're averaging about 250 people per site, and so very busy. And we've seen some people that have been very, very sick. We've seen some people that have been asymptomatic. We've run the whole gamut. But I don't want to call myself a frontline worker because I really feel like the ER doctors are, they're there. You know what I mean? But I'm out here trying to work on contact tracing and preventing the spread of disease. So that's me.
And you know what? Before you go even further, I just want to say we appreciate, just collectively appreciate the work that you are doing on the ground, on the front lines, especially in service of, our communities, which as we have learned and continue to hear, are disproportionately, impacted,
Yeah.
for various reasons. And so I'd be curious, what has it been like, you know, on the front lines? What has it been like as a doctor, medical care provider, advocate? What has it been like for you during this time, this space and
It's
time?
it's been a mix of emotions. It's been exciting at times, scary slash harrowing at times. It has been frustrating, particularly now, as the states have opened up and people are back out, kind of as if COVID did not exist. It's frustrating, but also it's been very fulfilling, and we've received a lot of accolades and kudos, especially from the people in our neighborhood, in North Nashville, which has meant a lot to me because one of the real big reasons why I stayed at Meharry beyond the students. is also that community in North Nashville of majority African Americans. People from different ranges in the spectrum of socioeconomic backgrounds, but a lot of them are in the lower end of that, and have been disproportionately affected by healthcare problems and have had lack of access to good healthcare. So to help them out means a whole lot, and just a mix of emotions. I'm like today was a frustrating day for me, but I'm overall I'm happy.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of, it's been interesting. I did a post um a couple, maybe like 2 weeks ago when states started to entertain the idea of opening up.
Hmm.
And it was cause for a pause because I felt like it was literally on the heels of us learning that Black communities, brown communities were disproportionately impacted. And so when we think about like just sort of the timeline of like mainstream like narratives, it started
Hmm.
out as okay, this pandemic is all the way over there across the
Hmm.
pond, across the pond. It was especially from a U.S. perspective, and then it came, once the narrative was a bit closer to home, it was wow, it's only older people who are disproportionately impacted. So there were a lot of like measures and a lot of guidance put into place. And then as
Hmm.
things started to, we started to learn and track race data, or I'm sorry, as people started to call for the imperative of tracking race data,
Right.
right? We learned that it wasn't just, or the face of COVID was not an older white person.
Right.
Those fatalities were not just, these older white communities who travel abroad, and
Mm.
that the face of fatality was in fact communities who are already impacted by just sort of systemic environmental racism, what have you.
Yep. It's almost
And
like
then
they
shortly after, everybody wants to open.
yeah, they got the green light to go, and meanwhile we are continuing to suffer. It's funny you should mention that our president of our college, Dr. James Hildreth, has been one of the more outspoken people in terms of representing the disproportionate effect on the African American community. He spoke today on Capitol Hill, and was speaking directly to that about racial disparities, and trying to have it's good that we have a stakeholder, a voice at the table, but it's even better when people listen. And this is happening in a period of time where there's an election coming up, and we will hope that people are seeing the response to their local politicians and really understanding the effect that they can have even locally, even if you don't. There's been some controversy about things that have happened in the presidential race, and let's just put that out the window. Let's talk about locally. Your congressman, your senator, your the people that represent you in your community, your aldermen, whoever. This is the time to see what they're doing and let your voice be heard from that capacity. Because it is people like us, and I got to be frank. A lot of us have skepticism about voting, and my vote doesn't matter, and all this kind of thing. Well, just in your community, just get those people out that don't care for you, that haven't stopped by to see how you're doing, that have the business interests of like the big business in mind, and less about the constituents that are living day to day. Get those start there. You know what I mean? Get the turtle guy from Kentucky out of there. That'll be a good
Mm-hmm.
start.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you talk like so I think it's the one us more broadly recognizing like our own agency and power and how we can influence this politically. Um, I also think about just information and misinformation,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And the power of social media in this, because it's
Yeah.
just like, I even thought about when we began having the race conversation, there was a lot of focus on sort of just like individual level influences. And so there was a lot of focus on like, you know, diseases that are, prevalent in black communities without necessarily like also shining the light on or highlighting the systemic influence and structures that are why a lot of these sort of like disparities exist, right? And so when you
Yeah.
think about close contact with people, that's because we're disproportionately, in environments where renting apartments, subsidized housing. When we think about how some of pre-existing conditions influence,
Yeah.
fatality, we can't talk about that without also talking about biases that exist in healthcare and like how they show up in treatment, right?
Mhm.
And so I just wonder just your perspective on all of that and what it even means to be, and this might be heavy, kind of like what it means for you to be a black man kind of experiencing this, a black man who kind of is hyper aware of all
Yeah.
that is going on from a practice perspective, but then even just experiencing it,
Yeah.
right? Yourself.
As a black man specifically, my role, I take my role very seriously because all the studies that I've looked at in terms of how patients relate to their physicians and other things like that show that a patient that is congruent with the doctor, in other words, comes from the same socioeconomic background or, from the same racial background, those outcomes are better. I was blessed to go to Meharry Medical College, and where, we were taught to treat everyone uh, equally, regardless of their disease condition, regardless of where they come from. And there are even medical textbooks that say African American people have higher thresholds for pain. And, people practice this way. You look at people as famous as Serena Williams, who had to undergo like a traumatic childbirth, you know, because the belief is that, she's faking it if she's asking for pain medications. You know what I mean? Meanwhile, we can give pain medications liberally to people who probably have a higher risk of becoming addicted to them. So for a black male, it really like I want to impact the people behind me. I'm a big pay it forward guy. I
Mm-hmm.
was my schooling. I had gap years. I had some time where my father got sick and I took some time off. And I wasn't the best student. I was not near the best student. I was probably at the very bottom of my class for many, many years. And I was saved by our dean of students, Dr. Pamela C. Williams, who has since passed away. But she basically took me and gave me a reality check and gave me a second chance. With that second chance, I wanted to emulate her example and be that for people that come behind me. Because the gift that I have, I mean, it's an awesome task. And I mean awesome in both sense of the word. Like awesome in terms of like, yes, I enjoy it, but also awesome in that it's like it can be overwhelming at times how
Mm-hmm.
much you have, that you're responsible for. You know, I want to get to the point in my clinic. My goal is that I can start seeing patients, treating patients preventatively so that I'm not prescribing medications. I don't make any money from the big pharma. I don't have any interest in them. I don't go to the dinners. I don't do anything with that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? I I don't get extra money from insurance companies. I'm on a salary from Meharry Medical College, which is a whole different ball game. And I like to be very transparent with my patients and tell them those kind of things and let them know, that I am aware of things like the Tuskegee experiment and things that
Mm-hmm.
happen with sexually transmitted diseases in Nashville, Tennessee, and the different experiments that were done at various large institutions in Nashville and the things that were done to African Americans, in the name of advancing medicine, and there's real distrust there, and it's earned. It should be there. And a big part of my job is to try to build that trust back up by being factual, as you mentioned, giving good information, educating, talking to my patients, and not talking down to them, not pandering to them. You know what I mean? Because like people think, if you have a certain level of education, oh, that corresponds to your intelligence, and that's not the case at all. There are many, many people that have, not finished school that have, there are people on the other end of the spectrum. They're educated fools. There are people out there that have degrees and terminal degrees that can't tie their shoes. You know what I mean? They're not functional. So, I come in there with no preconceived notions as much as I can, and I try to meet patients where they are and talk to them about trust, talk to them about education, putting it in their hands, letting them know, this is what you can do, this is what I'll do, and we work together as a team to help make you enjoy the quality of your life. Because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. This thing right here is a serious disruption of our quality of life. Can't leave your house. And people, I know people that are introverts that love being at home, but they kind of like the option of being at home. You know what I mean? They don't want forced being at home. They want to be able to get an invitation to something and chill and say, no, I'm good. You know what I mean? We don't even have that option right now, and it's not normal. It's not something that we should adjust to. We are adjusting to it because human beings are remarkably resilient. God has gifted us with the ability to adapt and to the worst conditions. We can make the most of it. But it's not normal. It's not. This is something that we've asked a lot of the population of the United States, and I'm happily surprised at how much we've been able to do. But I'm just holding on for just a little more. Just let's stay under that curve for just a little bit longer, and
Mm-hmm.
get ourselves together. And the economy's suffering. Nobody wants. We're looking at probably a prolonged recession, if not a depression, after this thing. But at what cost for lives? You know what I mean? Like money. These billionaires, they have so much money that they don't know what to do with it, and yet they want more. You know what I mean? And other people are just out here working, busting their hump so they can, go on vacation with their kids, or be able
Mm-hmm.
to enjoy a nice dinner. To not have to worry about, making a decision about the lights versus the gas, versus the water bill. It's so there's so many disparities out there, and people have lost the ability to have compassion, to think
Yeah,
about their
yep.
fellow man.
Mm-hmm.
Even something as simple as wearing a mask, because wearing a mask actually doesn't benefit you as much as it benefits the people around you. And if
Exactly.
people would consider that, I think, but people are saying, oh, it's uncomfortable, wearing it under the nose. And I mean, it's just, it defeats the purpose, and it's inconsiderate. It's inconsiderate of your fellow man. And I wish we could get to the point where we think about, and trust that other people are thinking about you, and we can do better that way. But, we're fighting an uphill battle in that regard.
That is such a. I feel like that's a really just connecting something as simple but impactful as wearing a mask back to like what compassion looks like, and so the act of caring for, relieving someone else's like pain or the probability of them, being hurt. Like it's just a simple practical thing, and it's so interesting that that has become a form of. I'm just gonna call it how I interpret it, like people feeling as though wearing a mask is like manufactured oppression. Like now I have to wear this mask. You are like imposing on my rights. It's so bizarre to me.
Yeah, yeah. It's almost as if people are seeking something that they can relate to, a struggle they can relate to, right? When in fact this is, I mean, it's nothing as compared to some of the struggles that people are
Right.
undergoing right now. You know what I mean?
Yes. Lack of
Um,
access.
yeah.
Like it's it's interesting, and so to hear you even call that out as like that, this is what the folks love, like practical things. Compassion on a day to day during a global pandemic looks like wearing a mask. Wearing a mask even though you don't feel like it. Wearing a mask even though you feel as though it is unnecessary or is an over exaggeration. Just do it because this is
Yeah,
what it looks like on a daily. That's how you care for others
yeah. I had a mask
during a
on
global pandemic.
for 8 hours today, and the first thing I did, I get into in my car, is rub the back of my ears because it's pulling there, and I mean it's like it's not comfortable, but I know what I'm doing. I know how many people I've been around that potentially have this disease. I know what the purpose is, and why I'm doing it. So for me, that supersedes the comfort, the temporary discomfort that I have. So
One thing
yeah.
that you brought up that I think is so relevant is just the history behind just cross cultural mistrust, which is valid. You referenced the Tuskegee experiment. So I wonder, as someone on the front lines of testing, like what has been like the reaction to testing? How does that, trust factor play into what you've been experiencing in your
So
role?
I've had people from all races, ages, genders ask me if I'm implanting a chip into their head. Like asking me, are we making up the numbers? I mean, there people have concerns about this. Was this something that came out of a lab from like Bill Gates? Like, I haven't had too many 5G questions, but people have asked me just about all the conspiracy questions that I can think of, and my answer to most of them has been, well, this has caused a major disruption in so many facets of life, and people, it's been so random as to who has died and who hasn't died. Who would do something like this? You know what I mean? What kind of sinister cabal, and what is the end goal? It doesn't make sense for it. I mean, people are dying in all walks of life.
Mhm.
I have there was, the test is an uncomfortable test. I don't know if have you had it done?
I haven't. So walk us
Okay.
through it. Like, what is the, yeah, what's involved in the test?
So it's like a flu swab on steroids. So with a flu swab, they go into your
I've had a flu swab. Yes.
Okay. So this has to go further into your nostrils, way to the back, almost to the back of your throat. Now, you can accomplish the same thing by going into the mouth and going to the back of the throat, but that would elicit a gag reflex that would make people vomit. So it's actually more comfortable to go that way, but it goes far. And how I describe it to patients, because I had it done myself too, is that it feels as though you have salt water up your nose. It's going to make your eyes water and burn just a bit. That's exactly how it feels. And I try to not lodge it in there. Like I saw a brutal video that I love Rex Chapman on Twitter. I follow him, but I was so disappointed. He posted this brutal video of somebody that stuck a swab in a soldier's nose, left it there for like 10 seconds, then pulled it out. That we don't I don't operate that way. We try to. I really am cognizant of patient's comfort and try to really perform the test in a compassion. Having experienced that, I'm very descriptive to my patients and to people in general. I like for them to know what they're about to experience so that they can prepare themselves, but also so they can build some trust and know that there's no intentional harm being done to you.
Hmm.
I've had to swab children as young as 2 months old, and I
Wow.
have to be honest. Like I go home, and those are the roughest ones for me. I hate doing the kids because like I feel like they're gonna grow up and hunt me down and try to I've traumatized them. Um, it's not a fun test, and I'm saying that from the perspective of me performing it. So I really, it's really kind of a place of privilege for me to be feeling this way, but also, I mean, it does affect me. I feel as though I'm causing trauma, but I know it's a
Hmm.
greater good to it. And to the point of like trust and everything like that, giving people information and putting the power to them, letting them know exactly how to obtain their labs, exactly why I'm doing what I'm doing, so I don't have to repeat the test, so I can get a good specimen. And that showing them that it's coming from a sterile. I always make a point to show them that it's coming from something that is unopened. I open it right in
Hmm.
front of them. I walk them through every single step, and when it's done, I cap it off right in front of them. I don't hide any aspect of it because all of that matters. You know what I mean? People are watching you. I've had people record me. I usually request they record the process and not me, but
Hmm.
I understand where they're coming from because they want evidence that if something goes awry, look, this is the person that did this to me, and this is what happened to me, and I get it, but all that comes from that background of mistrust and distrust, and from people that are unethical that have created a baseline for us where we have to overcome. And it's not a whole lot of people. It's never a whole lot of people that are negative, but those voices are always the loudest and have the most profound impact. So, you know,
Hmm. Quick question around the test, and this is a selfish question because they have recently opened up public testing sites in Maryland. And so
okay,
I've been wondering because there's been a huge response. I was told that there was like a 2 mile, some of them are drive through even. So there was like a 2 mile backup. And it got
yeah.
me to thinking about, you know, should everyone be getting a test? Is it one of those things where it is or should be proactive, or should it be reactive to you feeling a certain way, coming in contact with certain people? What are your thoughts on
Understand that my answer that I'm about to give is a conflict of interest for me
that? Okay.
because it creates more work for me. But yes, absolutely, patient people who have not been exposed or who feel as though they have not been exposed, who have no symptoms, those are the prime people who should be getting tested right now because those are the people that are spreading the disease the most. And so, in order to do that concept of contact tracing, it's so important. Contact tracing is going to be. We're looking at several months to like maybe 2 years before we can get a vaccine for this, if we can get a
Gotcha.
vaccine at all. Contact tracing is going to be the key to really containing and controlling this thing. This is what was done in South Korea, what was done in Singapore. A lot of the Asian countries were able to pinpoint, like there was that story about the young man or young lady who went church and spread it at their church. But they were able to pinpoint that one patient, patient zero, and contain them in their contacts, and they were able to
Mm.
stop the spread in its tracks. We value here in America, and rightly so, we value our freedoms. We value our liberty. It's important. It's a fine line that we walk. With that being said, you can't have freedom or liberty if you're dead, and if your family members are profoundly affected. I mean, and we're not just talking about people survive, but people have lasting impacts. People have been on the ventilator for 14, 15, 16 days. That
Mm.
changes everything. If you've been in the ICU for longer than 2 weeks, and specifically been under anesthesia for that long, you are never the same. You have
Mm.
there are studies that show you the ICU effect is very real, and it profoundly affects your mind state. You have post traumatic stress. You have
Mhm.
dreams. You have just your stress levels are high. Your anxiety is high all the time, and it all stems from that critical care period where some very traumatic things are occurring to you. You know what I mean? Things that are unnatural. These things are not natural. What we do to prolong life and to survive, these things are not natural. You're not meant to have a tube down your throat. You're not meant to
Mhm.
have tubes in your arteries and your veins, collecting blood and placing medications that change your blood pressure and clamp down. And like you're not supposed to have these things are not normal. We're dealing with
Mhm.
unprecedented times. And so, even that what we call morbidity, the quality of life afterward, it's significant. I have a very good friend of mine. It's a brother of my best friend, but he's also my really good friend, who is a survivor. He was on the ventilator for about 16 days, and
Wow.
to have dialysis for about a week or so after that. And by the grace of God, he's home, still doing rehabilitation, still having to go through dialysis, and we're hopeful that this process will end for him. But significantly changed. I mean, he's lost weight, and this is not weight like losing weight. Like, oh, I'm happy about losing weight. This is muscle mass.
Yeah.
This is,
Yeah.
like his facial structure has changed. All these kind of things, and talking to him, I mean, he's there, but there is a veneer there. You know what I mean? There's
Yeah.
a piece of him is not back yet. You know what I mean? And he has young children. You know, he has a wife that has been by his side. From day zero, and the amount of dedication that she, when I was on the phone with him, I had to give props to her. Like, look, you are what a wife is all about. You've been with this man and continue to be with him, bringing him through this situation. It's changing his life inalterably. And that's what we need to think about in terms of like trying to prevent this thing. Make sure people don't have to go through that. It's not something that is a joke. It's not something that is to be trifled with. And when you act as though you are immune to it and you are free willy nilly to do what you want to do, it's an insult to those that have been through it. And again, a lack of compassion. You don't have compassion for your fellow man. So
Mhm.
that's how I look at it.
Yeah, one thing that I don't want to assume that people know some of the terms that we use in. So contact tracing, what
Okay.
exactly does that mean?
So contact tracing is looking at we have what we call patient zero. We're looking for the person that started an inoculation of the disease or the spread of the disease. The person that is the what we call the vector. They carry the disease. They don't manifest any symptoms of it. They're walking around. They feel good, but they have the disease, and everybody that gets in contact with them, because of how strong this desire for this virus spread is. This virus has a high virulence factor. It's up there with the measles in terms of like if you are exposed to it, you are very, very, very likely to get it. So we try to isolate that person, and then everybody that they have been in contact, and then everybody those people have been in contact, and it works like kind of like a phone tree or like one of
Gotcha.
those little diagrams where you see the family tree. It spreads
Mhm.
out, and it's time dependent. So if for instance, let's say we have a church service today, and I go to church, and there are 45 people in church, and I shake hands with 10 of them, right?
Mhm.
What we want to isolate, we want to find out. Okay, I went to church, and 2 hours later, I want they should know who I shook hands with and who they shook hands with, and where do they go, who do they see, what do they do, who do they breathe on, who do they talk to, And if we can pinpoint those people and stop it and nip it in the bud, we can help contain a virus that spreads this way. You know, and notice I said contain because really, like at the end of the day, this is something that until we come up with either a reasonable treatment or a cure for or a vaccine, we're going to be seeing this thing. It's new. It's brand. They use that term novel a lot, especially at the very beginning. Novel means that it's brand new. It's never been exposed to human beings, and that's why so many people, when they see it, get sick because your body has absolutely no defense for it. It's an open door. Your body says, "Okay, we don't recognize you," but your body generally is like, "Okay, there's a lot of things we don't recognize that are beneficial. We let it in, right?" So the body let this one in, and it went haywire. It started, and I always the comparison I make with viruses in terms of how they act is like they act like a rogue copy machine. They get into your DNA, and then they start making copies of itself. Like boom, instead of making copies of energy cells and of your hair cells and all these other kind of things, it's making copies of itself, and just crazy. And when it does that, your body flips out. It goes into an immune response. And the killer here with COVID is that the immune response has been so exaggerated that it's almost like how when people are on chemotherapy, how the chemotherapy attacks the person's own body. Your cells are attacking itself. They're going crazy, causing clotting, causing fevers that are just off the charts, and essentially like burning, boiling people. Like it's not to that extent, but it's too high temperatures. The temperatures are not compatible with life, and the clotting cascade, it just goes into overload, and it's like, okay, we're gonna stop this, nip this in the bud, and even if that means cutting off the kidneys blood supply, so be it. Then that's what we're dealing with, and we've never seen anything like this ever. Like we've seen, like the measles was something that took a lot of people out. You know what I mean? And it was something that we dealt with for years and years and years. We've seen things like trying to think of another situation, like the Spanish flu is a real good example because we're following almost an exact footprint of the Spanish flu. Spanish flu occurred in 1918. There was an outcry from society. People were shunned for not wearing masks. All these kind of things, the same things we're doing now. And there was a peak that happened in the summer, and it went down. And then in the winter, almost triple cases. Almost triple cases. And we're following that blueprint because of the desire, the need to open back up the economy. And what happened after the Spanish flu? We had a depression. You know what I mean? We're following in the exact same footsteps, and we're making the same mistakes that we made in the past. It's like we didn't learn a single thing from what we experienced. It's been forgotten.
There's this so I always bring up the West African phrase or symbol like Sankofa, and like how, right? Like so folks don't want to assume everybody knows, but Sankofa, if you've seen it visually portrayed, it's a bird looking at its back, its tail. But the translation is it's not taboo to go back and fetch what we forgot. Underscoring like what Dr. Smith said here, there's so much to understand, to learn, relearn, to like interrogate and maybe like course correct if we really leaned into like the past, the history that is before us. And we don't do enough of, I feel like that is such a common place when we like even just think about equity and injustice more broadly, right?
Yeah.
So much we could be learning.
Yeah. For us, there's so much trauma associated with it, and for them, there's shame, and both of those lead to fear. You know what I mean? So we have a fear of looking back because they are ashamed of what they've done, don't want to own it. We have trauma. We don't want to relive that past that we've lived. And so, and it goes in almost every scenario, like, unless you have an unflinching eye, and it's hard, it's like therapy. Going to therapy and opening up and being real about your feelings is the hardest thing you can do because it calls for accountability. And, we struggle with accountability. We want to put things on other people as much as we can, shift the blame to other people, when we have to do a good moral inventory of our own situation and say, look, what is the part that I play in this, and what things can I control? The things that I can control are the things, my reactions to things. And so, if you think about things from that perspective, it makes it easier to accept and to be accountable for what you've done. But if you don't want to do that, if you don't want to do that hard work, then you end up manifesting in negative ways. And
Yeah.
and you don't control. The biggest thing is you don't control it. It comes out of you in road rage episodes. It comes out of you in dog leash, dog
Hello.
whistling. You know what I mean? It comes out in you in stepping on somebody's windpipe. You know what I mean? Because you don't know, you can't control your fear. You can't control your reaction. You lose control. The people that are supposed to be the main de-escalators, they come into a situation with fear and lose all control. And so the only thing they have left is to shoot a gun, is to apply force, to apply deadly force, so that they can regain control, i.e., decrease the fear that they have.
I love the emphasis on accountability, right? And so even in our work, just the term kind of like, especially on like equity work and the role that white people play in equity work, a lot of times we use the word term like ally, right? Mary
Yeah,
Frances we started using the term like power broker, getting at, essentially getting to the fact that accountability looks like you, for one, understanding the history, how it has influenced sort of your social power, how you
yep,
show up in a system dominated by whiteness and white supremacy, and then furthermore, like how you course correct that in your day to day. A
right,
lot of that has to do with your interactions and things like political power, political
yeah,
engagement, what you're putting out in your social media sphere, like what narratives you're uplifting over others. You deciding whether or not you wanting to get your nails done or on an outing is more important than the lives that like just all of those incremental shifts. And then when we talk about just sort of our community, just like understanding trauma and
mhm,
recognizing and naming it as a real thing so that we
mhm,
aren't necessarily like colluding with messages or narratives that suggest we're inherently like less than or unworthy of. Like, nah, it's like much broader forces, systems at play. And then how
yeah,
do we work as a collective to your point, work through it and then hold ourselves accountable?
yeah,
It's like, and it's all connected.
yeah,
One,
absolutely,
one thing that I heard and just sort of just tracked in how you when you were just sharing more about your work, like I could really just sense the passion and how assumption here, like emotionally connected you are like to the work that you do. And
yeah,
so this conversation for the folks who are listening to this is on the heels of Ahmaud Arbery. This past week we learned of another white woman using her power to essentially put a black man's life in jeopardy. She
yep,
called the police,
yeah,
lied on him,
yeah,
said that her name is Amy Cooper, said that she was being threatened
uh-huh,
and needed help right away, which is essentially in this society a death. That's a death
yeah,
threat. Like that's like
yeah.
attempted murder in
From
some.
an African American man, she put emphasis on that and raised the tone of her voice.
Yeah,
I mean, like
yeah,
it was textbook. It was almost as if she couldn't control that
yeah.
reaction.
Right. And just the onslaught. And then today we learn about Minnesota. So
Yeah,
at the time of recording, 526, we're learning about a police officer using accessible force and I believe killing another a black man
yeah,
in the street.
yeah. Callously.
And kind of like, so my question is just from a just from a care perspective, just kind of like managing the toll of you obviously being a care provider,
Yeah,
but then also, experiencing this world as an
yeah,
everyday person, black person.
yeah,
Like what does like the whole care conversation just look like for you? Because I think that's relevant to a lot of people who consider themselves on the front lines in
yeah,
various ways.
yeah. I
What does that look like for you?
I view police brutality and violence in the community as a public health epidemic. That's what it
Mm,
is. It's a public health epidemic, and we it's out of control, and patients are suffering in ways that are not directly related to the things that happen to them. I.e., a big it's not even a theory. A big understanding of the physiology of the body for me is your circulating levels of a chemical called cortisol. Okay, cortisol is naturally produced by your body by the adrenal glands. It helps you in times of stress. Do what you need to do. Okay, but if your cortisol is always up, your body responds in negative ways, and the two biggest ways are increased blood sugar, increased blood
Mm-hmm.
pressure. Right? When we talk about African American communities, what is disproportionately affecting us? High blood pressure and the sugar diabetes. Right? So, if you really just take a second to think about the high stress levels, and like a friend of mine asked me if I wanted to go bungee jumping or what do you call it thing, skydiving, and I
Mm-hmm.
told him no. I'm my level of cortisol is always running in the baseline for me. I don't need that extra stress. I don't need that to feel alive. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Which is bad. Uh, but that's where, and so in my encounters with patients, always address their mental health. I always ask them, especially during this period of time, how are you coping mentally? How are you feeling? Acknowledging that this is not normal. That they should not be trying to adjust to this as much as they are to try to survive and live through it. You know what I mean? And to be cognizant of that. Well before Ahmaud Arbery, I was asking my patients, was it safe for them to? We have to talk about exercise, diet, and exercise. Those are the guidelines, right?
Mm-hmm.
For my patients, it's not just about being able to exercise. Is it safe in your neighborhood to go and run? It can be as simple as that. Can you walk around your neighborhood? And I'm not just talking about black neighborhoods. We always like to throw black on black crime. Well, white on white crime numbers parallel black on black crime. We kill the
Mm-hmm.
people around us. That's what
Mm-hmm.
that's what it is. So
Mm-hmm.
we need that narrative doesn't fly with me. But the dangers in our neighborhoods inherently, we need to know about that. Is it safe for your kids to drive around your neighborhood without being profiled? You know, like what are your day to day stressors and how is it affecting your health? Because at the end of the day, it's going to affect your health. It's gonna.
Mm-hmm.
It's not. I take a holistic approach. It's not just a disease process and a medication. Disease process and a medication. Use these medications to control this disease process, and a vicious cycle occurs. Right? No, it's about making sustainable changes to your life. And I'm not gonna, I got somebody that's been smoking a pack of cigarettes a day for 40 years. I'm a fool if I think this guy's just gonna quit cold turkey, or this young
Mm-hmm.
lady or whoever. I'm a fool to think that's gonna happen. And
Mm-hmm.
if I'm not doing my part to help them to do that, I put them on a fool's errand. I put them on a task that's impossible, and I set them up for failure. So recognizing my role as a healthcare provider in this public health crisis that we are going through, recognizing, and I hate, and I don't like the word hate, but I hate when
Mm-hmm.
people say colorblind or I don't see color,
Right.
because that is part and parcel with why we are going through the things we're going through. You
Mm-hmm.
need to acknowledge the color and acknowledge that this is what is causing certain, even if you feel like you don't act this way. And you notice the first thing that this woman, Ann Cooper, in her apology said was, I'm not racist. She wants to disavow herself of that, right? But all of her
Mm-hmm.
actions show otherwise. And so, maybe own up to it. Say, hey, I have some fear of this African American male, and I need to re-examine this before,
Hello.
and think about the effect I might have on his life. And maybe, as soon as she put that leash on that dog, what did he do? Say goodbye. Went away. He
Mm-hmm.
wanted her to obey the law, which is
Mm-hmm.
what they always tell us. Well, if you just comply, if you just obey the law, to ask her, God forbid that her dog in an area where there are birds that are,
Mm-hmm.
rare species and all this kind of thing, that just has her dog running around willy nilly. A dog's instinct is to chase and hunt down birds. A lot of these dogs, the cocker spaniel, is going to chase. That's what they do. That's their breed. They don't even. A lot of people don't even understand the breed of dog they're dealing with, but love those dogs more than they love the life of a fellow human being. And that's, but then you saw the base instinct that she had. At the end of it, she's basically choking the dog too because she has so much fear.
Like it.
I mean, like, that's powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. I love what you said about the what would an apology have looked like owning up to, right? And so, in some ways, I believe that, not even in some ways, in all ways, denial is essentially like the heartbeat of racism.
Yeah,
In that, if you're not even going to own up to, not just seeing color, but
yeah,
judging on the basis of and recognizing that that is something that happens and in this moment or in this scenario, not only happened but caused harm,
yes,
we can
yeah,
never even get to. cures or solutions or actions, right? If
Well,
every, yeah,
you have to be a stakeholder in it, and right now they're
older,
not they're not stakeholder. And when I say they, I'm speaking of racists and people who are apathetic to racism. Um,
complicity, yeah.
they're
Mm-hmm.
not stakeholders. It doesn't affect them directly. It doesn't affect their bottom line. They have managed to avoid being around people of color. The people of color that they're around, oh, you're different. I when I when I realized my role in all of this is I was training at the VA hospital. And I don't want to besmirch the people out there because I truly believe this is more ignorance than anything else. But I'll never forget one of the nurses there said, well, you're not like a lot of these other black people. And
Mm-hmm.
expected me to take that as a compliment and didn't understand my almost fury and wrath at that. Like, I come from, I went to Westlake High School in Atlanta, Georgia, which was 99.9% black. Grew up with people that lived in the Boat Rock housing projects. Grew up with people that lived in Kimberly Court. Lived in a house where, and God forbid, I hope my mom doesn't get upset with me for saying this, but she had to make decisions about the lights versus the gas bill. And there were
Mm-hmm.
times where we had to, warm up the water, and put it in the bathtub, and and so we went, or we had to go stay at cousin Sandy's house, with because the lights were off. You know what I mean? So I'm not so far removed from that, and I never will be. Like I am my brother. Like that's me. So when you
Mm-hmm.
say I'm not like them, no, I'm exactly like them. And if you open your eyes and get to know more people like me and see the humanity in people like me, but when you don't when you're not around people of color, you can dehumanize them really easily and turn them into a disease process. Turn them into like call them a crackhead. Call them with immigrants. Call them an immigrant instead of who they are. You know, I do stuff just at the simple level of like when I used to work as a hospitalist and nurses would call me about a patient, they call about a patient in a room, blah blah blah. I say, what is the patient's name? You know what I mean? And just to humanize people so that I recognize that like this is the patient's because this could be their worst day of their life. You know what I mean? You don't know just that touching and being in touch with people as human beings and recognizing that they are not a disease process, is not the person with AIDS, but this is Calvin Smith. You know what I mean? And he happens to have a disease. You know, like, just being human and recognizing humanity in people. I mean, that would be a miracle in and of itself. But
Just
we're
seeing the
dealing with a yeah.
humanity. Let's just start there. Just seeing. And then one thing that I think is worth underscoring that you said is and Dr. Kamara Jones, she says this a lot in her talks that inaction in the face of need is just as racist and it is a form of racism, just
Yes.
like sort of these overt. And so inaction, complicity, indifference, denial, all of those things are
Yeah.
also racism, are
Yeah.
forms of racism
Yeah.
that we shouldn't get.
Yeah.
And more specifically, white people, people in power, we can't get comfortable. We can't get
Yeah.
comfortable sitting in indifference or denial
Yes.
or on a
Well,
bystander esque, right?
that's why a large segment of us got really upset with Joe Biden. And again, rightfully so. Joe Biden, what I'm gonna be controversial for a second.
About to get real, y'all.
What he said, if I said it,
Mm-hmm.
would hold more weight and it's probably even with tongue in cheek is a little bit accurate. He can
Mm-hmm.
never ever ever say he can't form his mouth to
Mm-hmm.
say that. And if you understand race relations, you know why. But and he got comfortable, and we got comfortable with him. We got comfortable with him. We started talking about this picnic, blah, this imaginary picnic that we invite all these nice white people to, right?
Everybody made it to the cookout.
Right. Everybody, your invitation to the cookout's been revoked and all this kind of stuff, right? Joe can't come to the cookout no more. But in reality, like he should not. He should be able to recognize that that's not his role to play. That's not for him to say. You know what I mean? And he doesn't have to pander to the black community either. The like I mean I look at and Bill Clinton had a lot of faults. I mean the crime bill, all the super predator, all that stuff is his, and he has to own that. But one thing he did not do was pander to African Americans in a way that was like he was as authentic as I've seen a politician be, and just in terms of recognizing the humanity of a different culture of people. And that's what we need. The thing about Joe Biden is, and I hate to get so political. I'm probably gonna get in trouble at work, but I don't care. The thing the thing about Joe
It's
Biden
timely.
is
Timely. It's timely. The
he is
conversation is timely, folks.
he is essentially a reformed racist. That's if you look at the history of Joe Biden, and I mean, I believe that people can change if they have a desire in their heart. He's undergone a lot of trauma in his life with kids and other kind of things. You know what I mean? He probably is a different person than he was. But let's make no mistake about it. He was somebody that was arm in arm with the Jesse Helmses of the world. You know what I mean? Like he was complicit. He wasn't just an apathetic racist. He was somebody that was pretty. He was in there with them. You know what I mean? The busing, all these kind of things. He had strong opinions about that. And our elders and people who study these things don't forget those things. And so,
Mm-hmm.
when he says something like what he said on the Breakfast Club,
Oh, it's very
that's boom. That puts all those things right back in the forefront of your mind. And
it's so
it's just it's again, he can't say that, but to tell a person in privilege they can't say something is like oppressing them. You know what I mean? And to his credit, or to the people behind his credit, they pretty much backed away from that statement as best as they could, you know. But it's there, and once a word has been said, it's out there. You can't take it back. No takesies backsies. No, none of that stuff. It's not how life works. So I don't know, man. It's and we were already on a fragile balance with a lot of people who were like, well, I'm not gonna vote, blah 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 blah. Now those people definitely are. I mean, like that did it for a lot of them, and
that's tough again.
that's a shame because we're cutting off our nose to spite our face. We're throwing the baby out with the bathwater, and take a chance. What do you have to lose? Well, coronavirus 2020, depression 2021 and onward. 7 conservatives on the Supreme Court. Continued police brutality and very fine people on both sides. That's what we have to lose, and that's quite a bit, especially when you are directly affected by it.
Mm-hmm. That's I'm actually glad you brought up the Joe Biden thing. We're gonna wrap up in a bit, but I do think that a lesson learned there, that in connection back to this work, is that in as much as we are all having conversations about race relations, all of our role in these conversations are not equal. And so there are conversations that Black people can have intra group
Yeah,
about the things that we need to work through, understand about ourselves, policy. And there are conversations that white people, white leaders, specifically with positional and social power and privilege, that you all can have on your own accord, that lend itself to progress, justice, equity, that shouldn't involve being critical of the people who are most impacted by the systems you benefit from. And so I'm
that's
just going to put that out there
that's
because
exactly
I
it.
do think it's worth stating that, and we can absolutely, as communities of color, and even as subcultures, Black community more specifically, have conversations about ourselves and with regard to policy and how and why we should vote and who we should support and all of it and everything that's going on. And that's okay for it to be intra-group conversation. And part of owning one's privilege, especially in a system of racism, is knowing how to show up, when not to talk, what to say, when to just kind of amplify
Right.
and all of that. And it's a shame that
That's that.
present day politicians don't know that. It's a
That's that being
shame.
that ally you talked about. That's being an ally. Ally is not the same thing as a teammate. It's not the same thing as it's even not the same thing as a stakeholder. An ally, just that somebody that is
Yeah,
a support system that
real
then goes
power.
back to their role and helps in that capacity.
I'm with it. We're gonna wrap up because we covered a lot today, and I certainly don't want to take away from the birthday festivities. Rest whatever
I'm
you.
good. This is added to it.
I wonder, as a final question, because this is something that I'm passionate about, just really as individuals in this work, ensuring that we're all like filling our cup, making
Yeah.
sure that we're like taking care of ourselves, making sure that like even as we are like hypersensitive and aware of all the things that are going around us, like how do we
Yeah.
make sure, or how do you make sure that you how do you prioritize like just sort of your self-care and all of that as you continue to do the work that you're doing?
So my biggest priorities are number one to myself. So making sure that I remain healthy and taking precautions to stay healthy, be it eating right, taking vitamins. I suck at exercising, but being physically active as much as I
Mm-hmm.
can. So that part of it, I like to, and there's a lot of well-meaning but toxic memes out there talking about, I'm gonna remember who reached out to me during this period of time, right? I try to reach out to people as best I can, you know what I mean,
Mm-hmm.
and support them and look out for them, and vice versa. You get a lot of that love back, and I'm not gonna be all things to all people, but I do want to reach out, and I talk to my mother every day. You know,
I know
I
that's
I, I talk to my sisters, I talk to my nephew, I talk to my to a lot select individuals daily, and then there are other people that I reach out to as as needed. In social media, I give people enough of me, but I also keep some of that for myself. You know what I mean? And then being compassionate, and spreading the word about wearing masks. What other people can do for me, just go out, just wear a mask properly. That's if you do that alone, if you insist on being out in public, doing that alone will help drop the transmission rate, to a manageable level so that an ICU bed can be available for those that need it, as well as the person with a heart attack, because those people still getting sick too. You know what I mean? So, being thinking about your fellow man, and all those kind of things. So, filling my cup, making sure I'm taken care of, because I can't take care of anybody if I'm not well
hello.
rested, if I'm not in a good mind state, decompressing in a healthy way, all those kind of things, and then reaching out to the people I can reach out to, and then spreading the message of being compassionate for others, i.e., wearing a mask. Those are the things I do.
I love it. That rest part, self care part is real. I've been following this Instagram account called the Nap Ministry, and they pretty much posit that rest in and of itself is like a form of like resistance, especially in this work. Like, you know
Yeah,
what? I'm gonna pause and yesterday was the holiday weekend, and at first I had these things I wanted to accomplish. I was like, oh, I'm gonna take a walk, I'm gonna do this, da, da, da. And I was like, nah.
yeah,
My son was away, y'all. My son was with his dad. I didn't have no. I sat in the house. I
yeah,
was like, this
yeah,
is what work. This is productivity.
yeah,
Me chilling, eating my food, watching my Netflix,
yeah.
and just want to be in. That was self care. That's what self care looked like for me yesterday.
That's dope. I
Anywho,
really have enjoyed this conversation. I'm glad that this is a part of my birthday today. This is dope.
we're gonna have
This
to
is
ask
dope.
Stevie Wonder's happy birthday to the recording here. Um, thank you so much, Dr. Calvin Smith, for joining us on the Ecclesia Solution Live. And it has certainly been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed it.
And I'm sure you would agree, what could fit more perfectly than to have a world party on the day